streaming.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to Exile Captain Arctic Live. We are live from the UK Arctic Research Station in the Ålesund on Svalbard, and that's an island halfway between the top of Norway and the North Pole. We're here on the Arctic Food Web Food Chain Investigation session, the second today, and looking forward to talking to you more about the types of life you might find here in the Arctic and developing some of your skills as well. So we'll be looking at the process, the interdependence of that life, and also how scientists use secondary sources as part of their research. That's a working scientifically skill. We're going to go through this activity. We've also got some questions you've been brilliantly sending through, and wonderful to have some of the classes who have pre-registered for this as well. We've got PD Graham Elementary School from Michigan, we've got Jonesville Middle School, St Richard's Catholic College in Bexhill-on-Sea, Thornley Bank Primary School in Glasgow, and Oakwood Avenue School, Orange, New Jersey. Wonderful to have you with us. Really excited to be doing this investigation with you. Before we start, just to explain a little bit more about the science that we're doing up here as part of Arctic Live. We've got two sets of science we're doing, but they're both looking at the same thing. They're both looking at human impact on the Arctic Ocean. Now, behind me, we've actually just had a bit of clarity. The clouds have drifted away momentarily. We've got a little bit of light behind me. So you might be able to see through the reindeer antlers the fjord. Fjord's a name for a sea inlet. It's a bit like a sound, I suppose. And we've been out there sampling the ocean. Now we're looking at two things. We're looking at something called ocean acidification, and that's where carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is absorbed into the upper layers of the ocean, and through a chemical reaction that changes the pH of the ocean, changes its acidity. Now, over the past 250 years, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there's been a 30% increase in acidity in the oceans on average. And what we're looking at here is we're monitoring how the pH of the Arctic Ocean is changing, and also seeing whether that's having an impact on the communities, so the life in the sea here in the Ålesund with the Kongsfjord and the fjord beside us. The other thing that we're looking at is microplastics. So we're seeing how many, if there are any, plastic particles there are in the waters out here. Another example of human impact. And we're also hopefully collecting some of the animals that might be eating those, ingesting those small particles, whether that's amphipods, a type of plankton that lives in the water here, crabs maybe. And so we'll be looking at where is that plastic? Is it in the surface waters? Is it in the deeper layers? Is it in the sea ice, if we can get to any of the sea ice here? Or is it in the animals that live in the water? But now we'll get into the sort of meat of this live broadcast session from the Arctic. We're going to be looking at some of the animals that live here, and hopefully what you'll have in your classes with your teachers, you've got a researching Arctic organisms sheet. I'll be talking a little bit about how to fill this in a bit. You might find some of that information online, or you might have an Arctic life fact sheet like this. We'll also be looking at how all those different types of life are connected in food chains or food web. And we'll be making a little sort of model of a mobile, and you can finish that off after the session. Nice little sort of design or art craft activity to do after the session ends. But we've got little cards here, little pictures of all the different animals, not all of them, of course, but some of the different animals that live in the Arctic that you might find around here. And we've stuck that to a bit of cardboard, just so we can cut out our cards, and it's a bit easier to make that mobile and move them around. So just to go over those three objectives, really, those learning objectives, those things we're trying to get out of this session. A little bit of knowledge about some of the animals and other life you might find in the Arctic. Understanding how they're connected in food chains, and how some of the animals that we might not think about as being important are in fact really important. And lastly, looking at secondary sources as a way that we can research a working scientifically skill. An example of working scientifically using secondary resources is the fact that the scientists have been looking at some of the animals that live around here. They've been looking off the jetty, looking under rocks, and trying to see some of those crabs or amphipods. But the science team here may not be used to some of the animals find out here in the Arctic. They've done research in the UK, they've done research in Antarctica. So they can use the internet or books to try and identify exactly which species they're looking at, or maybe even asking some of the people who spend a long time working in this area. And I want you to do exactly the same thing. On this sheet, what you'll see is we've got a list of some of the animals that you might find here. So we've got algae, or algae, as it might be pronounced in the US, Arctic cod, Arctic fox, beluga whale, clam, copepod, polar bear, ringed seal, and walrus. And we're asking some questions about those animals. What does it eat, or where does it get its energy from? What eats it? So that's starting to form that chain if we can connect those living things together. Is it a producer or consumer? And just to go over these two terms, a producer is a living thing that gets its energy from the sun, so it's turning that solar energy into living matter through the process of photosynthesis. And a consumer is an organism that is consuming or eating another living thing and getting its energy in that way. So we'll be looking at producers and consumers when we lay out our food chain. The Arctic really is a marine environment, so we find most of that production is happening in the waters. So we've got algae blooming in the Arctic Ocean. Not much at the moment, but more as the season progresses, as we have spring turning into summer. And then that allows for the abundance of life to develop here. And the last question we've got, is it predator? Does it eat another animal? Is it prey? Does it get eaten? Or maybe it's a bit of both. That's one of the things we'll find out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to leave you with that and to see if you can find out answers to these questions. But first of all, I'd love to know a little bit whether you can, I've given you a list here, can you think of any other animals that might live in the Arctic? I'm going to have a look at the live stream over here and see if any of those classes watching, whether in the UK, US or beyond, can come up with an idea of what other animals live in the Arctic, some that I haven't named yet. So let's have a look and see where we are. Fantastic. Huge amount of questions coming up. I've got ermine. That's a great answer. That's I think it's a type of stoat, if I'm not confused. I haven't seen any up here. Wonder if there's any other ones come across. We've got polar bear, of course, Arctic wolf, another great Arctic animal. No wolves on Svalbard, so we're quite lucky in that way. Arctic fox from St. Richards, great. We do have a very wonderful Arctic fox here who lives by the kitchen. Can't quite see him from where we are, but really, really sweet Arctic fox. Whale, beluga whales out in the fjord really may have to wait for more of that primary production, so there's more food out there. Puffin, a bit further south probably. Here we've got penguin. We've got coming up, and I promise a massive prize. We'll post a reindeer antler to any school that can name an Arctic species of penguin. Okay, so get your Arctic species of penguins on the live chat, and you'll receive a reindeer antler in the post. It's probably giving away another animal that we have up here in Svalbard. We've got narwhals, snowy owls, fish. Yeah, we've got Arctic cod. You'd have up here. And the class wants to know if they can see outside. Can we get a view? Ellie's behind the camera. She'll be joining us for someone. We can get a view outside through the antlers and have a look at the fjord and the mountains behind. We'll get that out at the moment. Lion seals I haven't come across. Leopard seals I have down south in the Antarctic, but sea lions I think further south, but not lion seals. Seals definitely up here. There's a walrus colony just down the way. We've got caribou, which I think I'm right in saying is the US term for reindeer. There's different subspecies here, but definitely reindeer up and around. And they've been feeding on some of the bits of grass starting to poke out from the melting snow up here. So really, really good range of animals you've got there. Lovely to hear that. Mr. Chris's class, thanks for the reindeer popping in there at the end. Lots of questions coming through as well. I'm just going to see if we can get you doing a little bit of research, and if we can get the classes saying, what does it eat, what is it, those kinds of answers. What we'll do is we'll have a review of questions, both that are coming through on the live chat and that are coming, being sent through beforehand. So I'm just going to switch over now. I'm going to leave you doing a little bit of research, and we'll answer some of those questions at the same time. So here we are. I've got some ones coming through, and how many different, this is from PD Graham Elementary School, this is Miss Taylor's class. How many different kinds of animals are there in the Arctic? The honest answer is that we don't know. We're finding new species the whole time. We're researching more and more in the polar regions. We might even find a new species on this expedition. So the other thing is that with the warming ocean, we're finding new species in the Arctic, species that used to live further south. And so that's creating a bit of competition, and that's a challenge that the Arctic environment is facing. From Mr. Chris's second grade class in Canton, Michigan. This is Gage T. Have you ever had that moment when something really cool happened and you said, oh yeah, this is why I'm here? Oh, great question. Definitely. I think the first time I saw the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, that was a definite oh yeah moment. And maybe another moment, I've got a video of this, a 360 video, is abseiling down in Moonland, which is a vertical shaft in glacier, 150 feet down and into an ice channel. It's like stunning other world, and we're inside the middle of a glacier, 150 feet of ice above us, 150 feet of ice below us, in a place that no one had ever been before. So that was pretty cool. But most of the time, my oh yeah moments are when it's a nice day. That, for me, is one of the best views in the world. That's a really big oh yeah. Great question, thank you. Jonesville Middle School. And we've got Abigail's question here. What are the producers in the Arctic food chain, and how does the food chain flow? Great questions, Abigail. This is something you should be working on at the moment, using secondary sources to find this out. To give you a hint, the main producer in the Arctic is the algae out in the Arctic Ocean. We do have various plants underneath the snow here and grasses, and that's what the geese, the reindeer, will be eating in the summer. But for that marine environment, we've got the algae out there. So that's one of the main producers in the Arctic. Kicking on, we have, where are we? We have another question from PD Graham Elementary School. We have, what does the polar bear like to eat, and does the polar bear have any enemies? Well, the polar bear likes to eat seals, uses sea ice to hunt those seals. And does it have any enemies? It can come into conflict with people. So it is the apex predator here. It's a top predator here. But it can decide that humans would make a good meal, and it can come into conflict with humans and then potentially be shot if there's a safety issue there for the people involved, very sadly. When those conflicts lead to a polar bear needing to be shot. This is Aidan from Michigan. Which food do you really miss having while out during your expeditions? I think fresh fruit. We've got a little bit of fresh fruit on this expedition, but fresh fruit and crunchy things normally. Expedition food can tend to be fairly mushy, frozen and then sort of cooked up again. So fresh fruit and veg, definitely. It's a tripping over my words there. Jonesville Middle School. We've got a question from Cordelia. How and what is a typical day for explorers in the Arctic? The problem with the Arctic is that there are no typical days. The weather in the Arctic and the conditions here mean that you might want to plan to do something, but your plan gets thrown out of the window because the weather changes. So today, we should have been out in the boat, but let me just sort of describe what should be happening when we're here. We're at a research station, so that means we've got nice bedrooms and nice warm places and everything. We've got sort of labs and offices here. Get up at about 7 o'clock, get your stuff ready, go over for breakfast in the canteen, have a wonderful bowl of porridge and a cup of coffee, come back, get all your sampling equipment ready, go down to the harbour, get into a boat, go out on the fjord, get water samples, trawl a net through the water to collect plastics samples, if there are any plastics, come back, you've had your packed lunch out there, come back and analyse those samples, get them sorted out, maybe have some dinner about 8 o'clock, do a bit of emailing and communicating with the team back in the UK in the evening, and then it's bed at 10. So your working day is a good sort of 14-hour working day, and you do that for a sort of 3-4 weeks. We're here for 2 weeks. We've got to cram everything in a really small amount of time. I was going to check the wow, look at all these questions coming through. We've got lots from Bexley-on-Sea, from St Richard's Catholic College, and also from Thornley Bank Primary School. Just from Ollie and Jackson in Bexley-on-Sea. Do you eat special food when in the Arctic? What is the food and drink you like? Really depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing a big expedition and you're pulling all your kit in a sled or a pulk, you might be eating 7,000-8,000 calories a day, and then you have to have really high calorie food, peanut butter, fatty things, chocolate, all that kind of stuff. But if you're just operating from a base here, it's really quite ordinary food. Probably the kind of food that you might have in your canteen at school, but pretty nice canteen food. It's really, really great. The only thing on the menu here that's probably a bit different is probably the reindeer. We have every couple of weeks, so I don't know whether you have reindeer or caribou. I'm just going to see what we're getting through on the live chat. Do people have reindeer or caribou on the menu in their school canteen? Are there lots of yeses coming in? Just checking in on some of the questions coming through. They come through thick and fast. We've got Colegio San Patricio from Mexico. Brilliant to have you on. And so we've got Mexico, we've got the US, we've got the UK all on. And I'm just going to try and whip through some of these questions. We might have to have an additional session because there's so many questions coming through. From 1 to 10, how cold is it? Not very cold. It should be cold, but it's about 2 degrees Celsius, which is about 35, 36 Fahrenheit. Are there any plants in the Arctic? Yes, but they're under snow at the moment. How do you do experiments? We do them back in the classroom. How do you drink water from a tap and then into a glass? Are there herbivores? Yes. Copepods in the ocean. Reindeers on land. Is it cold? Not enough. How do you take a number 2 in a loo? What does your hut look like? We'll put photographs up over the weekend. Have you ever done a dab? I have done a dab where somebody has never done a dab before. We explored an ice cave and a glacier over there, and I've dabbed. First dab ever inside an Arctic glacier. Again, photographs over the weekend. Beat that dab is what I'm going to say to that. Have you seen a polar bear? Not yet. Print's the other side of the fjord. What animal? These I should be giving you names as well. Those last two. Joshua, thank you very much for the dab question. Jasmine for the have you seen a polar bear? Alicia, hello, what animal is the main predator here? Is the polar bear. Joshua, when have you encountered a polar bear? Luckily not yet. Jasmine, have you been bitten? No. Then we're going to scroll down. Narwhals, I really want to see a narwhal, but they're a bit further north in the sea ice. Perfect. Coming all the way down. Have you had a snowball fight? No, of course not. We're very serious and we never have snowball fights, honest. And the snow's really slushy at the moment, so probably best not to. But they're quite good fun. Would like to know, my class from Brittany over would like to know, what animals have you been able to get close to? And that's brings up a really, really good point. We try to have as low an impact as possible on the environment that we're studying. So we're really, really trying not to get close to any wildlife. I mean, maybe if we're collecting samples of smaller sort of wee critters in the ocean, then that's the case in point, where we might be collecting them, but really try not to get close to and disturb the wildlife. And so these amazing questions. What I think we might do now, keep the questions coming, but what we're going to do is we're going to start to look at some of the animals that are up here and how they're interconnected. So hopefully we've got some of that going on in classes. You've done some of your research, and just check as we go through these, and I'll go through some of these answers. But what I've done is I've taken my sheet here on the cardboard and I've cut it up into cards like this. So I'm just going to come a bit closer to the table. Put that down here. Move these over. So in no particular order, and then we'll talk about some of the science here. Ellie, make sure we're making sure these are on shot. I might just start. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to start with the sun. So at the top of most food webs and food chains, not all, is the sun. Is that a good place for the sun?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Then coming down from the sun, I'm trying to find the algae. Oh, there we go. Algae's gone on the floor. Get that out from there. We've got the algae, and that's the primary producer here in the Arctic. So we're going to put that underneath. And in fact, what we're going to do is I'm just going to put that here. And we talk about arrows in food chains. I've got 3 pencils here. Make an arrow for you. Now the arrow go in the direction of the energy. So the energy is going from the sun to the algae. And I might just pick another pair just to demonstrate that idea. Let's get an Arctic cod, and think about the Arctic cod's not going to be giving energy to the algae. The Arctic cod is going to be giving energy to the beluga whale. So in our very short food chain, this with 2 things in it, almost like a food link, we've got this arrow of energy going along. Just wanted to remind us of that, and then I'll start laying out the whole food web again, all the food chains up here. So coming back to the sun at the top, then the algae. And then I wonder, just on the live chat, if we can think about what kind of organisms, living things, might be eating the algae up here. So we've got copepod, that's one of them. And you can see here we've got more than one choice. We've got the copepod there, and the other one that might be filtering through the water getting algae, we've got this clam type of shellfish. Next up, we're going to look at, first of all, the clam, and from the animals that we have left, picking one of those that eats the shellfish. So I'm going to get the whiskery one, the one with whiskers that lives in the water and mooches around in the bottom, eating up the clams, and that is the walrus. Now, on the copepod side, copepods, super awesome animals, the most abundant animal on the planet. And there's 1,347 billion copepods in our oceans. Amazingly important. They're also pretty cool. Relative to their size, at their fastest, they have a little escape kick. That they are faster than Usain Bolt. Yeah, so they're pretty amazing little critters. What we're going to look at, though, is what eats them. And I've got a few things here. I think it's the Arctic cod. So the predator eating the prey of the copepod. The predator is the Arctic cod here. And these are all consumers. Then I've got to think about, okay, so what's eating the Arctic cod from here? And there's a couple of things here. I've got the beluga whale. And I've got the ringed seal. Now, hopefully you've done a much better job, or you will do a much better job at colouring these in. This is truly poor colouring skills. And then we're looking at what's eating the ringed seal. And I've seen that a couple of these I've been asking about what the top predator is in the Arctic. And that's this guy here. That's the polar bear. And the polar bear eating the ringed seal. And also, occasionally you find that the Arctic fox is also getting some of the babies. Mostly, the Arctic fox is around here. They'll be getting goslings or baby geese, and they'll be burying them for the winter. So the baby geese and the goslings around here are sort of big food for the Arctic fox. So we've got those laying out now, and what we're going to sort of tag team it slightly with Ellie, and we're going to be laying out some of those connections, showing how the life all works here, and then thinking about how some of the problems facing the Arctic, how those might affect the connections, and whether the polar bear is the most important animal, whether the copepod is the most important animal, or whether we can't really divide up and say this is the most important, that's the most important. So we'll be answering some of those questions in a bit. So you can come on in, grab a microphone.
Hi everybody. Some really great questions coming in so far. Very impressed. Really cool questions.
Well, should we just, if I give you the strings,
sure.
is that the best way of doing it? And I'll see what our wonderful audience members are doing.
I hope you're all following in the classroom and you've all created your own food chains and food webs as well, so that you can follow along with us.
Sticks. Do you want to explain the sticks?
So at the moment we're just using these sort of little skewers. Hopefully your teacher has cut off any sharp ends if there are any. But you can use any sort of little rods, wooden doweling or anything like that. And what we're using these for is for any time there's a decision to be made, a choice of multiple predators that could eat the same prey. So it's sort of each level of the food chain, really. So, for example, you only have one producer that can eat, that can photosynthesize, that can harness the energy from the sun. So really these are critical because they are taking sun's energy, which is where all the energy on the planet comes from, and bringing it down, locking it into the organic living matter on the Earth. So that transition is fairly stable. But then after that point, there are lots of different things that could eat the algae. So we add a divider because the energy could go from that into the clam, or it could go into the copepod, or of course lots of other things. We've just got 2 in our food chain. Same again, we have another division further down here where there are several things that could eat the cod. The whale could take the energy from the cod, or the walrus. And again, right at the top level of the food chain where we have those apex predators, we have another split in the pathway that the energy could take. Either the polar bear eats the walrus and gets the seal, sorry, and gets the energy that way, or the fox could do it. So you get these points at which the energy could take different pathways. Remembering as well that the arrows always go up the food chain towards the apex predator.
Perfect. We've got a couple of great rounds of questions here. Just checking on one thing, because Remote Wood Avenue School, Isaiah is asking us about equilibration. And I don't think that's something we've mentioned. We may have mentioned acidification. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, Isaiah, can you get you and your teacher just try and give us a little bit more help on that? We'll definitely come back on that, either through District Explorer or best on the live chat, and we can see that up here. But taking another question from Oakwood Avenue School, we've got Vincent's question on how does carbon dioxide in the water affect the animals? Well, first of all, Vincent, the carbon dioxide changes the chemistry of the ocean. It changes its pH, its acidity. And what we're looking at is how that affects different animals in different ways. Some organisms find it easier to have a higher pH, often those that live in lower pH, that are more acidic, that sort of live in coastal waters. But it's affecting different organisms in different ways, and that's what we're finding out here. We'll be putting out some experimental pads and seeing how it affects the different species. So that's something that we're looking at. Definitely more research that needs to be done there. Thornley Bank Primary School. I'm going to ask Ellie this actually. This is a question from Chloe.
Okay. Hi, Chloe.
What inspired you to want to go and explore the Arctic?
Oh, that's a really good question, Chloe. I think personally I've always liked adventure and travel and exploration anyway, so I quite like exploring everywhere, whether it's a jungle or the ocean or a mountain or even just a bit of wild backyard out in sort of nearby to your hometown. So I've always been keen to be outdoors. The Arctic in particular is a very special place. It's unlike anywhere else because it's so remote and because it's so fragile. even though it seems a very harsh environment, it's very beautiful, it's very gentle in a way. It's sort of a gentle beast. So it's a really magical place, and it's somewhere that I've spent quite a bit of time in the Greenlandic Arctic. So within the Arctic Circle, so very high latitude north, but in the Greenlandic side. And I was keen to see what the Norwegian side would be like here in Svalbard.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ellie. That's fantastic. Just I want to give a shout out to a few of the schools and classes. Names I recognise from past Arctic Lives and Coral Lives. So it's great to have Canto Primary back, and Miss Stufa. It is wonderful to have Mr. Perez at Park Avenue and Lincoln Elementary School in New Jersey. I'm just going to scroll down to see if there are any more here. CSP is here. That's great to have you on board from Mexico. And I'm just seeing as I scroll past some questions also from Jonesville. We're just going to work through some of these now. I know we've got about 10 or so minutes. We might do a quick sort of, one of those sort of high speed passes, and then we can talk through some things a bit more. Ishad at Park Avenue, can you see dolphins in the Arctic? I think we've got the beluga up here. It's probably the closest thing is a toothed whale. Yeah,
that's the furthest north. That sort of, with dolphins and porpoises, they tend to be a little bit further south, but we do get the belugas up here.
Do you go to the sea to study? Luckily, we don't have to go to the sea to study. There are some boat suits next to us in case we do fall into the sea, but very much hoping to stay on boats. That is the plan, and I hope that plan doesn't change.
A lot of the sampling we do here on the boats is in the fjords, so that is connected to the ocean, so you get a mix of salt water and fresh water, but technically they're inland water bodies, so a deep sort of estuarine environment opening up into the sea.
Does it rain a lot where you are? It shouldn't be raining.
Normally no, but it was raining quite heavily this morning.
Yeah. What is your most vivid memory from past expeditions? Certainly I think my first time in the Arctic was on the Arctic sea ice, and we landed in a small twin otter on the ice with 2 meters of ice, 6 feet of ice, and then several hundred feet of water below. And just hoping that you've got to trust your pilot very much when that's happening. And then being 400 miles from anybody, we were in a tented camp, seeing the aurora borealis for the last time a couple of years ago, abseiling into glaciers, taking trips across the tundra on Skidoo across those glacial forefields up onto the glaciers. Very, very special going out on snowmobiles and lots of fun times up here. So important science, important research, but also fun times to be had. So highly recommended as a career.
It's definitely helpful that it's so beautiful here. For me, simply flying over when you first arrive, the views down onto the glaciers, especially there's a huge glacier behind us that's actually moving quite quickly, unusually fast, and it's crashed into another glacier, so the two are flowing into each other, and that's causing it to crack and buckle and split. So there's these deep crevasses, and as you fly over, it's absolutely stunning to realise the scale of it, and we feel very small in our little plane as you come over. We're going to put up some videos of that over the weekend, so do keep tuned on our social media to see what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is from Dr. Durkin. What special clothing do you wear? Normally, okay. So normally, I when I packed at home in London and the UK, coming up to the Arctic, I went, okay, it's going to be a standard Arctic expedition, -10, -20 Celsius. Mm-hmm. What's that? That's sort of between there's about sort of -10 to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Really nice. Classic Arctic temperatures. I'll pack all my warm kit. I'll get my nice, warm Arctic jacket on. It's been on lots of expeditions. Same thing for the trousers. Ellie might be able to grab one of my boots there. Some nice big, warm, toasty boots here. it's got so slushy and icy that we've actually had to put sort of little spikes on the bottom of our boots here. And then big hats and gloves, and normally I have 3 pairs of gloves. I have thin gloves so I can still use electronics, and then a wind barrier just for normal, and then a big pair of mitts. If I start to get frozen fingers, I can put the big mitts on and try and warm up my hands there. Came prepped with all that, and it's been 2 degrees Celsius, 35 Fahrenheit, raining. So I don't have any waterproof clothing because
the Arctic's normally dry.
It's supposed to be a cold desert, and so I'm not quite sure. I'm probably going to get a bit damp over the coming days. So hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully we'll get colder. I've never quite sort of been in the Arctic before wishing for cold. So normally you're hoping it's going to get a bit warmer. It's sort of -40, which is the same in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. Only time it ever meets. But hoping it's just going to be a bit warmer.
It's certainly drier as well, because cold we can handle because you can warm yourself up. But when things get wet, that wet gets into your joints and into all your clothes and your bones. It's much harder to deal with when you're a bit soggy and cold rather than dry and cold.
And we've got this question from Joshua Augustin. Do you use snowmobiles for travelling around the Arctic? Great question, Joshua. You would do if you're doing glacier work. So you would be out in snowmobiles, and there are teams here. So there's researchers from must be about 15, 20 different countries here at the moment. Research stations from 10 plus countries in this science village in Ny-Ålesund. We aren't doing glacial research this year. We're doing marine research, so we need to be out in boats. I don't think a snowmobile would be terribly useful out on the fjord.
Jet ski would be a bit cold and wet, wouldn't it?
Definitely. Jonesville Middle would like to know, what Arctic animal do you think would be your spirit animal?
Oh, that's a good question.
I've got mine. What's yours?
Yeah. Or maybe a wolf, or even though there aren't any in Svalbard.
I'm going for the narwhal.
You're going for a narwhal?
I'm going for a narwhal.
Good task.
I mean, a cross between a dolphin and a unicorn. What's not to like?
What's not to like?
So, any ideas? So that was from Jonesville. Would love to know what Arctic animal. Yeah, what would your spirit animal be? That's fantastic. What is my coat padded with? From Joshua. It's a sort of like a I don't know, fleecy synthetic thing. I do have a massive down jacket as well, but I left it at home because I thought it's not going to be -40. In fact, it's a good 40 degrees warmer than that, which is 72 degrees warmer than I thought it was going to be. There we go.
I have a coat that's made from seal skin and reindeer leather. It was made sustainably in Greenland, and that's just too warm at the moment, because those authentic materials that the hunters would have used hundreds of years ago were really designed for very, very cold weather. So unfortunately, that's too warm.
This coming in from Becky as part of Dr. Durkin's class. Are all Arctic animals camouflaged white?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so you'd think yes, and there are lots that are. Polar bears and Arctic foxes tend to be white. Ptarmigans. Lots of the birds are white or black and white, because that's quite good to sort of camouflage against the rocks and the snow. But of course, there are sort of 2 main seasons in the Arctic. You've got 24-hour daylight in the summer, and sometimes the snow can melt in places, and there's brown grass coming through. And then, of course, in the winter, it's 24 hours of darkness and white. So you do get some animals that have a darker fur during the summer months, and then white in the winter months. But yeah, always camouflaged, really.
And another great question from, I've got this as the handle, but Miss Lopez, I think it's class, wants to know how the animals can survive the frozen waters.
Oh, that's another good question. Yeah, so obviously if we fell in the fjord, even on a relatively warm day like today, we wouldn't last very long, I don't think, before we wouldn't survive very long. So most of the animals, the marine mammals certainly, that are able to survive in these very, very cold waters and even under the ice, have a very thick layer of blubber, which is like a fat that's very insulating. and they have a very clever bloodstream. Their blood system all stays deep inside that blubber, so that the heat that's generated from the body doesn't escape. A bit like a thermos flask. And you can get your teacher to explain about insulation to you as well.
I haven't got insulation next week.
Yes, we do. Tune in.
Keeping warm. I think it's on Monday.
Yes.
So we'll be doing some keeping warm experiments on Monday, both in terms of clothing, and also how animals keep warm. We'll be looking at blubber gloves, and does blubber actually work?
Yeah.
So tune in for that on Monday. So that's at both the UK and US times. I just wanted to go back to some of our other submitted questions from Bexhill, Thorleybank Primary, and Oakwood. So from Isabel, what happens if you get seriously ill?
Another good question. Yes, so we are in a very well-established research centre here, but we are still very remote. So there's no hospital or even a doctor here. There are some people who are medically trained, who have first aid training, and we have some first aid training. So for cuts and scrapes and things, we've got painkillers and plasters for small stuff. Anything bigger than that, we can phone the doctor down in Longyearbyen, which is the nearest town. That's the main town in Svalbard, has a population of 2,500.
Like that, yeah.
So it's still quite small. But that doctor is able to guide you through some advice on the phone. And if they need to prescribe some strong medication, we do have a cabinet with medication here, but you have to get the doctor's permission. So he can prescribe it on the phone, and then somebody is allowed to give that medicine out. Anything more than that, any serious injuries, we have the option of getting somebody onto the next plane out, and there are 2 or 3 flights a week. And any more serious, if it's an emergency, if somebody's really badly injured, then we can have a helicopter evacuation. And so that can come up from Longyear and take them back to the small medical sort of facility there. Anything more than that, they can then go on to Oslo, for example.
Brilliant. And these questions from Thornleybank Primary School, I've got Moman and Jack asking, do you think there is a chance that you might discover a new species of animal or something like that when we're up here in the Arctic? Probably we won't discover one, not because there isn't one to discover, it's because it's not the focus of the research. We might find one by chance, but it's not the focus of the research. The research is on plastics and ocean acidification. I've got to check back to see whether Isaiah was talking about ocean acidification. Can you get a shout out? Can Amari get a shout out? Yes, you can. Hello from the Arctic. How are you? No problems. Jane McCurdy, you can get a shout out too. Brilliant to have you online. And then we've got a few other things. We've got here from Payson from Lecanto Primary wants to know how long we're staying here for.
Okay. So we're here for 2 weeks in total. We've been out here for a few days already. So we've got about a week and a half left. And next week we've got 4 full days of live broadcasts. So do tune back in and you can follow those as they go later onto our YouTube channel. But our team is out every day for the next 7 or 8 days. So they're doing quite a lot more sampling. It's quite a short time for us to be out. 2 weeks is not that long. Normally, a researching team would be out for 3, 4, 5 weeks, perhaps even a couple of months.
Amazing. And here we are from DPS Bangalore South. Do animals get colds?
Colds?
Yeah, cold.
Oh, that's a really good question. Very good question.
Rather than burra colds.
Yeah. Very, very good question. And yes, there are strains of the influenza virus, the flu virus, which is like the common cold is a virus as well, that can affect animals. So you may have heard of bird flu or swine flu, which is pigs. And there was avian flu, which was several different types of bird. And there are certain viruses, flu and cold viruses, that can infect all sorts of animals. Bats, we don't have any in the Arctic, but yeah, certainly they can do. They can get the sniffles.
We've also had a request from Joshua from the Arctic shout out. So
Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Joshua.
Joshua's been sending in lots of questions,
Yes.
so thank you very much for being so engaged. That's fantastic.
Brilliant. We're nearing the end of our session. We'll try and answer a few more, but we just wanted to. There's a little bit referring to how does the prey hide from the predators in the Arctic. We've got the white point from before.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously there's not many trees to hide behind or climb to escape from your predators. A lot of the predator-prey relationships, as you'll see from your food web, are in the ocean. So you can swim deeper or swim faster than your predator. That's one way. And of course, once you go a bit far in the ocean, light doesn't go very fast, so then you can kind of hide in the dark depths of the Arctic under the ice, under the sea ice. On land, camouflage definitely helps. So the Arctic hare, for example, is very white and fluffy, and you wouldn't see it. So the Arctic fox and the hare are sort of running all over the hillside trying to find each other in the mountains in the snow.
Perfect. I just had to take this bit of string away because we had an erroneous piece of string on our food chain.
I apologise.
Because Mrs. Quickle's class were very, very observant in saying,
well done.
how does an Arctic fox eat a whale? And the answer is probably only if it ends up on a beach.
Yeah, well, they would do if it's...
but what this string was really, this string was actually going like sort of this.
Yes.
It was a little bit longer than it kind of should have been.
Yeah.
And that you sometimes get Arctic foxes eating baby seals, but mostly they are getting the sort of goslings, the baby geese, round here.
So what you can do, and what you are already doing, it sounds like that class certainly is starting to stick these string and sticks together with some tape, and you can make a mobile food chain food web, which is really fantastic. So you can finish off your projects and then see what's the longest food chain you can make, what's the shortest, and how many different food chains include the copepod, for example.
Brilliant. So, I mean, just to go through this, we're running out of time. So just to end on the investigation, so many questions. I wish we could answer all of them. We'll try and have a flick through and see if we can get through some of them. We do have an Ask Me Anything session. That's in 3 hours' time.
3 hours' time.
Yes. So we've got an interview with Clara in an hour's time, and then 3 hours' time we have an Ask Me Anything open Q&A. So do save up the questions and post them again. We haven't had time to get through them on this session. But just to, Ellie, do you want to run us through? You're going to go on the camera, or is that probably easiest? Or
I'll go on the camera and then I can zoom in.
Then we'll zoom in. We'll zoom in, and we'll get you the final bits of the food chain up here on the Arctic. So we're starting off with the sun, and energy from the sun going to the algae in the ocean. Then that algae being eaten. Here we have the example of the copepod, also got amphipod and krill, and the shellfish, the clam here. But let's go on this long food chain down this way. We've got from the sun to the algae, to the copepod, to the Arctic cod, to the seal, to the polar bear. So we can see how that energy gets all the way from the sun through these different organisms, these different living things, all the way to the polar bear. Now, ending on this, we're talking about some schools, well, what can we do to protect the Arctic environment? And I think we hear a lot about the polar bear. We don't always hear masses about things like the copepod. Now, the Arctic Ocean is undergoing huge changes, and it's warming in the Arctic faster than anywhere else on the planet. The sea ice is reducing, as is the glacial ice behind us. The ocean acidification that we've been talking about before, that's happening faster in the Arctic than anywhere else. And a lot of this is being driven by increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So a lot of things you can talk about doing to protect the Arctic environment are really those that are going to protect your local environment as well. So think about lightening your impact, turning off lights, reducing the amount of energy that you're using, and maybe even using your voice to persuade others to do the same thing. So it's really a big thank you to all those amazing questions that have been coming through. Thank you so many to all the schools, and just to round up, I don't have a complete list in front of me, but we had the Colegio San Patricio in Mexico, we've had Dr. Durkin's class, we have had Oakwood Avenue School, thank you. Thornleyback Primary School, big thanks. St Richard's Catholic School in Bexhill. On C, we've had Jonesville Middle School, we've had Canto, we've had Mr. Chris's second grade class in Michigan, Graham Elementary School, PD Graham Elementary School, sorry, and there's DPS Bangalore South, Union Point Academy in Kentucky. Hello and goodbye. Sorry, it's just horrible to come on the end of the call.
So many people getting involved, so many different schools. It's fantastic. Do join us for further sessions with the Ask Me Anything, so that you can get your chance to get your questions through to us.
So big thank you, and it's goodbye from the Arctic for now, and hope to see you later today, and if not, then next week. Thank you so much for being part of XL Catlin Arctic Live from the UK Arctic Research Station. It's goodbye from now.